Welcome back to the Femme Football Collective podcast. I'm very excited for today's episode with Malorie Henderlong, who's a strength and conditioning coach at Auburn University. So Malorie is the Assistant Director of Sports Performance at Auburn University, working primarily with the women's soccer team. She attended Spring Harbor University and received her Bachelor of Science in Health and Exercise Science in 2019. She continued school at Texas Christian University, where she received her Master's in Liberal Arts. She also holds her CSCS and FRCMS certifications. Before Auburn, Malorie worked at North Carolina State University, primarily with men's and women's soccer. Prior to NC State, she was at Baylor University, where she was responsible for women's soccer and softball. She also served as a high-performance intern with Austin FC in the MLS. Prior to her role at Baylor, Malorie was an assistant strength and conditioning coach at UNC Chapel Hill, and she preceded her time at UNC as a grad assistant at Texas Christian University, serving the Horned Frogs from January 2020 to June 2021. At TCU, she oversaw all aspects of the strength and conditioning programs for women's soccer and men's and women's cross country. Malorie, thank you so much for being on. I'm so excited to speak with you. You're actually someone who some of my listeners have suggested and recommended that I ask you to come on. So some requests for you. So that's exciting, keeping the listeners happy. And
awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so can you just go over a little bit about your background and how you ended up working in Division I women's soccer?
Yeah, I grew up in a soccer family. I played soccer from a young age, played at Spring Arbor, which is a small NAIA school. I grew up in the private sector of performance training when I was an athlete myself and fell more in love almost with the performance training side of things than I think I did with the soccer ball at my feet. And I eventually realized, okay, I can make this hobby and passion my career and combine the two things that I do love, right? I love soccer and I love performance training in a holistic approach to athlete development. I just found myself as an athlete towards the end of my career in the gym more than on the field with the ball, and went to TCU as an intern, was in the right place at the right time to kind of move along into a greater role as a grad assistant. And every step I've taken along the way in my career was with the intention of getting where I am now. I wanted to be in Division I college soccer, working primarily with only soccer, and that's where I am today.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about your overarching philosophy and how you approach strength and conditioning in this specific population? So for listeners, we will be speaking primarily about Division I women's college soccer. Although Malorie has experience across different sports and different levels, this is the one that we'll focus on today. So yeah, Malorie, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing your overarching philosophy when it comes to strength and conditioning in this population.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that anyone coming to play a sport in college, especially at the Division I level at a Power 4 institution, they're pretty elite at their sport, right? A very small population of the world goes on to play sport collegiately. So in my mind, I'm like, they're pretty good to be going on to do this, right? But at the same time, I still view these athletes that are coming in to college as soccer players as developmental. They need foundational training. A lot of the times in the soccer space especially, they have a very low training age. They haven't been exposed to quality, consistent performance training in their adolescent years. So my approach in the college space is extremely simplistic. I always say, like, we're just going to do simple, savagely well. We're going to squat, we're going to hinge, we're going to push, we're going to pull with the upper body, we're going to stabilize through the core, and then on field, we're going to jump and sprint, accelerate, all of those things. And then soccer has a large component of conditioning to it. And that looks like, yes, your general fitness and running. And then a lot of my role goes into the biomechanics and skill and like mental resilience we build as well.
Yeah, and so I want to kind of stay on that topic a little bit of you do have athletes who have very low training age coming in. Like you said, they're great soccer players given that they've been recruited to play at Auburn, but their training ages can be very low. And how do you go about programming for an entire squad where you have players who you've worked with for 4 or 5 years with that, I know that this is your, first year with this team with Auburn, but potentially in 5 years' time, there's athletes who you'll have been working with for 5 years versus athletes coming in who have a training age of 0. And how do you approach getting a whole squad physically prepared when there's such varying degrees of training age?
I think there's a lot of different components to this, right? When an athlete commits to Auburn, so for example, the ladies who were freshmen this fall that arrived on campus in July for training, they received training from me 4 months prior to their arrival on campus. So they're in high school playing high school club soccer. I'm communicating with them, streamlining training through Train Heroic app, and they're doing 2 lifts a week, 2 speed or acceleration sessions a week. Again, it's straightforward. We're starting with a goblet squat. They're sending me videos of them training. I'm getting on FaceTime with them, but I'm just teaching them the foundations before they get on campus and helping them try to understand, okay, this is what you're going to have to be able to do when you get here. Once they're on campus, we're running through those same, what I would consider my foundational movement patterns. They're going to squat really well with a dumbbell, a goblet squat first. They're going to be able to do a push-up. They're going to do a chin-up, right? I think it's empowering for young female athletes to be able to move their own body weight effectively before I put them under a barbell to do a bench press or have them do a lat pull down and pull load. I'd rather see them move their body weight. We're going to learn to hinge at the hips. So RDL, glute bridges, lying hamstring curls, things of that nature, understanding how to control the pelvis and that relationship. And then from there, we progress accordingly based on the athlete. And then if you look around the room at the rest of the team, the reality is college soccer, we're utilizing the transfer portal. Everywhere I've been, it's been different. I'm a part of a staff at Auburn that arrived last year around this time, and I got on campus 11 months ago. This summer, we had 14 new athletes, 13 returning athletes. I think 6 that were freshmen, the rest that were transfers, some grad transfers. And guess what's happening this spring? We have 14 returners, 5 early enrolling freshmen, and we have 9 spots for this transfer portal. So I'm starting all over. I have 14 kids who have now either trained with me for 11 months or 4 months. And then I'm going to have 14 brand new kids that I'm going to find out where they're at when they get on campus. So when I give even a recruiting pitch, right, we have transfer portal kids on campus and I'm trying to sell them on why I'm going to help set them up for success. And I'm meeting the athletes where they're at. Day 1, week 1, week 2 is just me learning the athletes, how they move, and then we program accordingly. I always say my training is written in pencil so I can erase and rewrite. And any of the athletes I work with here at Auburn would say on any given day, I may program front squat for the whole group. Not everyone's front squatting, maybe half the group. Someone's got goblet squat, trap bar, safety bar. I've got a girl that doesn't get under a bar and we only use dumbbells, right? Given her injury history and what makes her feel good. And I'm willing to meet the athletes where they're at. But I definitely don't have a black and white answer. There's a lot of gray area.
That's a consideration I actually hadn't thought of is college athletics looks so different now than when I played college soccer, than I'm sure even when you played college soccer. The transfer portal was not a thing. Like, sure, people transferred sometimes.
I transferred in college. So part of my story is I played at a mid-major and it just wasn't for me. I had to go to my athletic director and ask for them to allow me to transfer. And there was no portal. I had to email coaches and be like, hey, I'm looking to leave my school. Can you come watch me in my summer league?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Same things. Like it didn't exist. On my team, we did have one player transfer in from Duke, but it was the same thing. There was no portal. She told her coach at Duke she was going to leave. She knew the head coach at my school from club soccer or, playing in a summer league with him as the coach. and reached out to him, like you have to do all the work yourself. And so
Yep.
now it's so much easier for students to transfer, and they do so much more frequently than I think was the case when we played. And certainly when I played, which was, I won't say how many years before you did. um, and yeah, and so now, like you're saying, you have 9 open slots for the transfer portal. That's insane to me that each year you could have that many. That must be such a difficult part of the job for you.
Yes, and you have to be strategic about it, right? We're sitting here and there's a lot of aspects of my job that are beyond the weight room and conditioning, let me tell you. Our roster, we have to understand we have 10 commits for the next year. So next, not this upcoming fall, but the following, we're gonna have 10 freshmen. That means we can't go in the portal right now and get a ton of portal kids that are current freshmen or sophomores in college. We need juniors and seniors who will have exhausted their eligibility, so we have room for those kids that are committed to Auburn in 2 years' time. That just means more roster turnover for me. That means we're going to get transfer portal kids in right now who are juniors, seniors, grad transfers. I'm only going to maybe have a year, maybe 2 years with them. Some of them have been at 2 other institutions. That's fine. I think that kids, it's great for some people. There, I have my complaints about it as well, but I look at injuries, and a kid is hopping around the country doing different types of training and philosophies in the performance space, in the soccer space. The group that got here, that transferred in this summer, they did my training program once they signed. Some of them, that was 8 weeks, some it was 4 weeks, depending on when they signed this summer before they got on campus. And they said they have never trained this hard in the performance space in their whole entire lives. And I'm like, well, my job's to prepare you for the demands of what our practice will be like. And then they said, I've never practiced this hard either. And I think those are important considerations. And I think we did a good job from a load management standpoint of monitoring that so we didn't have any catastrophic injuries this fall. But it's a huge consideration that people in my role really have to start considering when we get these kids in from other institutions that have made 1 or 2 moves around the country.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that mirrors a little bit more closely what happens in the pro game and in the NWSL, for instance, where the squad turnover can be pretty high. You have players who are on 3 different teams in the span of just as many years. You have to be thinking about roster turnover in terms of how many years are left on this player's contract, et cetera.
Yep.
So it actually is mirroring the professional game a little bit more than it used to. So that's definitely a consideration to have is that the roster turnover happening so frequently. So it really is a little bit of like, yes, you have to think about long-term athletic development within the program, but also how can I squeeze as much as possible out of this player in the 1 to 2 years we might have them? Is that something that you consider as well in your philosophy and your approach?
Yes, especially in the weight room. I'm going to use an athlete, for example, who transferred in this fall. She was only here for the fall. She simply came to Auburn to play her final year of soccer eligibility. She started at a school, transferred to another school for the spring semester, left that school to come to Auburn. Pretty extensive knee injury history, and I was like, "Oh, lordy." Now this kid, I love her. I'm gonna miss her dearly. Her and I'm like, I see myself when I look at her when I was in college. Hardest worker, strong personality. But for me, I was like, my main goal is her health and availability. I'm not worried about getting any much more out of her. We're bringing her here because she can make an impact on the field for us. And that she did. She was our leading goal scorer. I think she had 6 PKs in the run of play, scored all 6 this fall. Right. For me, everything was adapted to, okay, your knee's bugging you with this exercise. Here's this other thing we can do. If that's bothering you, let's do something else. All right, what's the best thing for you on this given day so you're healthy and available for practice tomorrow? Also recognizing she has aspirations to go professionally. So now we're sitting down and sketching out a plan of what does this look like now for her long term. So that is part of what I embrace in my role. Where other players, they're freshmen, they're redshirting, they're not getting a lot of match minutes. We're getting after it in the gym.
Yeah, absolutely. And when when players come in, when new athletes come in, you mentioned before your goal is to try to meet them where they're at. Do you have any way that you look at that or assess that? A way to figure out, okay, like yes, you mentioned looking at their injury history. Do you just kind of have them run through kind of a basic program at first, see how they move, use coach's eye and your experience, and then make adjustments moving forward? Do you do any kind of screenings or assessments? What's your approach to figuring out where they're at so that you can then meet them there?
I do rely on some different testing. So whether we use all vault equipment, so counter movement jump, drop, Nord board, force frames, we're testing hamstring, adductor strength, all of those things. That does play a role, but really at the end of the day, it comes down to my coaching eye and what I'm seeing and how the athletes are subjectively feeling and moving. So incoming freshmen, yeah, the first week or two, it's okay. You look really good doing this. Let's move on to front squat. Find where they fit. And truthfully, coming into this summer with this freshman and transfer group, I felt like I got to know them really well before they got here. I had a pretty good gauge on where they were going to be. You think the incoming freshmen had been doing training from me for 16 weeks. I was on the phone with all of them every week. A lot of them, or a handful of them, had performance coaches elsewhere growing up through high school that I've been in contact with and now have become some of my good friends and acquaintances on social media. And I'm like, okay, I have a good gauge on where this kid will be. And then there was some that, surprised themselves and surprised me once they got here and have really grown.
Yeah, and I want to touch on in a little bit exactly how you go through like progressions and regressions as needed based on where the players are currently at, um, and how you're programming it. Because something that is quite unique in the college game is the very different seasons. Like there is the true season, there's the off season, there's the spring season, and then there's summer kind of prep phase. So I definitely want to get into that. But before that, another really unique aspect of the college game is athletes are not just athletes, they are student athletes. And so you have academic stress, you have social pressures and stressors there because a lot of them it's their first time not living at home. And there's 17 and 18-year-olds now being like, freedom. And, they're away from their families for the first time. So there's a lot that they're learning about themselves, about life in school, in soccer. So how do you balance all of those unique demands on student athletes while still trying to keep them healthy and available and also trying to improve their performance?
I think right now that's what keeps me in college athletics and is the exciting part because I get to help young people grow and develop as human beings. And primarily, I'm working with a young group of women, and I get to help them develop into young women that are going to go into the world. Maybe they'll play professional soccer, most of them won't. They'll go on into their careers, they'll become mothers, wives, and make an impact in the individual spaces that they choose. And that's what excites me. But navigating that is a lot, right? And it's unique. We have to plan and unfortunately at Auburn, like classes come first here. It's a pretty demanding coursework. School's hard and we plan everything around class schedules. So our time blocks for things aren't always the greatest, but I'm big on just being adaptable and again, meeting the athletes where they're at. I think a big thing for me is the wellness survey that we do every single day. And I used to be indifferent about the wellness survey. I've utilized it other places I've been, but I've found so much power in it if you educate the athletes and are a good steward of their data. If I'm going to ask the athletes to complete this wellness survey every day, I better look at it and I better share it with the appropriate parties and follow trends and check in when necessary. So with our group, every morning by 10 a.m., while they're on campus. They let me know what time they go to bed, what time did they wake up, and they rate the following metrics on a scale of 1 to 5: sleep, fatigue, mood, soreness, stress, and desire to train. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And by 10:30 a.m., every single person who is a part of our support staff or technical coaching staff gets a report from me, and we have a gauge on where the athletes are at. And a recruit and her mom 2 days ago asked me, like, "Are they honest?" I'm like, "Oh, are they honest?" Right? These girls will tell me when they're arguing with their boyfriends, why they didn't sleep well, if they're menstruating, all everything. But we've cultivated an environment where they feel safe to do so, and they know that if something alarming is on there, someone is gonna check in on them. So, had an athlete the other day put a 1 for mood. The girl never would be a 1 for mood, and the first thing I did within her filling it out was call her and got her situated. She went over to sports psych, had the conversation that needed to be had, right, with the appropriate party, and I think that's the most important touch point I've had with the athletes since being here. It helps me understand all these other stressors that are going on in their life.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my days in college, and if we had had we did not have any of this technology. And if we had, I'm thinking of filling out that wellness questionnaire because I agree with you. I find tremendous value in the wellness questionnaire. And just like you said, as long as the athletes are educated on it and they know you're actually looking at it and making decisions based on it, and that it's actually driving decisions and driving their ultimately their health and their wellness and their performance care and performance support. And yeah, I'm just thinking it probably we would have needed some education and that psychological safety of like, hey, this isn't to punish you if you were up till 3
Mhm.
a.m. This is to just provide further education and support where needed. I think that's probably a huge factor in that population is the education component.
Yeah, and kind of to expand on, like, the data collection portion and just how that's grown in all aspects of sport and just in the college space. I think we have a lot of work we need to do to be better and be better stewards of the information we're collecting. But it's been a huge contributor to just our player care and overall health and well-being and availability. Our coaches, right? Brand new staff came into a brand new group in January of this year, and what they perceived a hard practice session, right? Or what they perceived an easy practice session, the athletes had a different thought on that. So I also take RPE after every session, and people can say what they want about that, but we educate the girls on the importance of it and understanding what each 1 through 10 means on any given day in any session. And we were finding that, okay, the coaches thought this practice session they were planning was easy, and the load monitoring with the GPS, right? When it comes to A cell, D cell efforts, high metabolic load, work capacity, all those things, we were like, oh, this is a pretty like easy session. Well, the athletes are rating it a 9 or a 10. Week 1, we're out on the field with the group. And then with the wellness report, we're seeing how they're responding to that load. And so that's been huge for us of just overlaying all that information. You have both the objective and subjective.
So it sounds like you're doing a lot with the team. You're doing their gym sessions, their conditioning, you're monitoring wellness and objective metrics throughout the season. So you're basically the sports scientist and the S&C coach that pro teams would have one for each role, but you are both
Yeah.
in
Are you
one.
asking me what do I not do? This is how I best describe it. I was listening to a podcast the other morning, right? And I've been in the MLS environment as an intern for 2 months, and I loved that space. Dave Tenney down when he was at Austin FC is now at Atlanta United. And if I was ever to go in the pro space, I'd have to replicate that because it was so bright in my eyes. I was like, this is so high functioning. There's people in every role, they communicate, the whole 9 yards. I am I told our coach when he hired me, I'm like, "I'm not the strength and conditioning coach. Don't call me that because my role is so much more than that." But I say I wear 3 main hats within our summer program. I'm the S&C coach, so I handle everything in the weight room when it comes to athlete development from a strength power aspect of gym. I'm the fitness coach. I handle all conditioning, speed, acceleration, and then understanding the biomechanics and skill of the sport to condition them for the demands of their position in the match. And then, yes, I'm the sports scientist. So I handle all data collection from wellness, RPE, anything we're doing technology wise in the gym, testing, and then all of our GPS data. And I sit down, I plan the physical periodization with the staff in line with their tactical and technical periodization. And now I'm getting these ideas. I'm like, well, what about the cognitive part? How are we planning when we're watching film, and what type of film we're delivering, and educational content about the technical and tactical sides of the game? So that's where we're getting to next. But I would say I'm all involved. I'm really thankful to be a part of a coaching staff that is open-minded and lets me have a voice and practice my craft. Auburn's one of one for me. I've been a lot of places in the college space, and this is the staff that buys into what I do in my role in their program the most.
Yeah, you mentioned Dave Tenney there, and I feel like Dave is like the godfather of American soccer performance support. Like, so many people have been influenced by him and his work. I feel like probably I would have to look into this, but I feel like most MLS teams have someone on their performance or medical staff who has worked for or under Dave at some point and been influenced by him.
Yeah,
He's just, yeah,
which the
he's,
best part is when I was at Baylor, I did this internship at Austin FC. And I think a young listener in the performance space listening to this podcast, or any young coach or person wanting to get in sports, like, hear me on this. I've been big on, I just take risks, and I don't take no for an answer a lot of times. And I do things that other people may think are a little crazy. So when I was at Baylor, I was like, okay, I have these 3 MLS clubs in my backyard: FC Dallas, Austin FC, and Houston. I know summer's my downtime. How can I do some continued ed and just go shadow some people? So I messaged the staff at FC Dallas, Houston, and Austin on LinkedIn. I was like, hey, this is who I am. These are the things I want to learn in your space. Can I come shadow you? FC Dallas and Houston gave me the cold shoulder, read my message, didn't respond. Dave Tenney responded in 5 minutes. And he was like, what if you come and do an internship? And I'm like, what? How did we get here? And then I had to write this whole basically proposition to deliver to my boss at Baylor and his boss, to the AD of health and wellness, on why I should be allowed to do this internship, which means I'm stepping away from some of my responsibilities at Baylor. How is it going to help me develop, and more importantly, Baylor soccer and our health and performance team there? And I was fortunate to be supported by the staff at Baylor. And then Dave just let me come in and learn and be around. And I'm actually going to a PSPA conference, so the Professional Soccer Performance Conference in Atlanta here, I guess, in a few weeks. So that'll be exciting to regroup with some of those people.
I love that. That is such good advice for younger clinicians, practitioners, coaches out there. Like Mallory's saying, is put yourself out there and take those risks, reach out to people. And also on the flip side, people who are established in their careers, be like Dave and pull people up with you. You know, I think Dave has done such a great job of that, and he's helped me in certain situations. I don't know anyone who has reached out to him and not been helped by him. And so I feel like that's a great lesson for all of us who are in our careers now and are a little more established, to pull people up with us. That is such great advice. So,
Yeah.
Mallorie, I'm super curious now, with all of the hats that you wear, can you talk us through a little bit about what a typical day during the competitive season looks like for you and for the team?
Yes. So our team this fall, we train in the afternoon. So we bring the group in at one time. In the college space, it can vary. Maybe you come in and lift in the morning, practice in the afternoon, vice versa. We believe in bringing the group at one time and just knocking it all out, similar to the pro environment. So morning tends to be, for me, I get in, have meetings. Maybe I'm finishing up the GPS data from the night prior because there would be days we had practice till 8:30 p.m. Um, Getting my own training in, working on things at my desk, and then usually around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're starting things over at the soccer building. I'm checking into the training room, touching base with the girls, right, based off of anything they put on wellness. We have film. I don't tend to really be a part of that. Maybe I've sat in on a practice planning session. Typically, we'd lift before practice. So twice a week, lift before practice, head out to the field, right? I'm running the GPS monitoring live on the iPad. I have some great interns that help me with that. I run the warm up before practice. I'm actively engaged in practice and different roles on the field. And then we wrap up. And in the fall, that's basically the same day on repeat. It doesn't sound like a lot when I speak it out loud, but I'm spending an abundance amount of time with my staff and these young women. And then in the off season where I'm at now, I'm just prepping for the athletes to go home for winter break, get them set on some remote training, meeting with recruits, wrapping up end of season reporting, doing a lot of the things I don't get to do in season when it comes to like continued education, connecting with people.
And then what about the spring season? For anyone who maybe is listening who is not familiar with NCAA and what spring season looks like for a female college soccer player, can you talk them through what that looks like at Auburn and what a day in your life looks like during that time of the year?
Uh, I think when people look at a role like mine, they're like, oh, spring season, lighter load. You know, in season, I travel, I'm at every practice. Spring, I'm getting some anxiety thinking about it. Um, we will Right, in college sports, when the ladies get back on campus in January, we will be in what's called an 8-hour period. 8-hour period, you're gonna only have 8 mandatory hours of training. Only 4 hours can be on the ball. The other 4 can be in the gym, conditioning, etc. So we'll have 4 hours worth of practice. Typically, we'll go 3 days a week, probably like Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, because we'll let them enjoy their longer weekends. And we will also lift 3 days a week. Then when we hit 20 hours, about mid-February, we'll start training every 4 or 5 times a week when it comes to practice, and we will still continue to lift 3 times a week, right? Any other conditioning, speed acceleration work is microdosed into those practice sessions. So a lot of times I'll do speed acceleration work on the field before practice. Maybe we'll hit some top-up runs at the end of a session. Additional conditioning, a lot of that will happen in the 8-hour period. As we ramp up for more time on the ball, I have to acknowledge, right, the volume. We don't want this huge spike in volume, so I need to expose them to more volume of running and total time on their feet somehow. And then once we hit 20 hours, I'm like, okay, can we get all of our conditioning with the ball at our feet? There will be those outliers that need to work on quote unquote fitness. So we'll have a little extra of that, but we'll keep that model of practicing 4 or 5 times a week, 3 days of lifting, total body. And then we can play 5 matches or have 5 days where we play matches in the spring.
Okay, so now I love that overview. And yes, you're right. The spring season is actually like more work because there's more time dedicated. Whereas during the season, it's more of perform, recover, repeat, right? There's
Yes.
2 games a week in college soccer. And so
Yep.
that's a lot of, like I said, a lot of perform, recover, repeat. Whereas in the spring season, from a physical development perspective, that's really your time and where you specifically, your role is leaned on heavily for the athletes. And so it is much
Very
more work.
heavily in our program.
Yeah. I remember my spring season, like, I feel like we spent more time with our strength and conditioning coach and performance coach than our soccer coach. um,
Yes.
and so I want to get into maybe the differences in how you're programming and how you're approaching physical preparation and development from the season versus the spring season. So you mentioned you do 2 times a week lifts before practice during the season. Is that broken down into like a strength day, a power day, or upper? Like, how are you programming that?
Yes, typically the first day of the week, it falls on a Tuesday because we play matches. We tend to play matches Thursday, Sunday, or if we have a one match week, a lot of times it's just on a Friday. So Tuesday will be our main strength and power day. Total body lift, getting our heavier work in season, especially as we advance on into the season, the volume's not very high. I'm extremely adaptable based on how everyone's feeling. The second lift of the week, it's divided up by, okay, high minute players. It's more like movement quality based and more upper body. The girls love getting under the bar and bench pressing and doing chin ups and all of that. Some of them not so much, but that's more of that day. Where the lower minute group or those medium minute kids that are floating between playing and maybe not playing, they get after in the gym because they will have also had a full training session on the field. And so we're still getting more. That day tends to be more like strength speed on that day. Filling the buckets that the athletes that are not playing need to be filled. So we'll have extra acceleration speed work, change direction work on that day, plus practice, plus an additional lift. And I'm always like, hey, I want you to be ready for when your name's called, if it's a week from now or a year from now. Um, so, and then in the spring, we'll transition to 3 lifts a week and they'll all be total body. I'll tend to probably have now, it's not black and white and it could change, but my structure right now is there's more of a strength power day. There's more of an upper body day, but we still have like lower body accessory work. And then we have more of a dynamic day or like our speed day in the weight room. But and we'll be in the weight room for an hour, maybe 45 minutes to an hour, especially when I have 28 athletes. There's a lot of coaching. There's a lot of moving around the room. I don't know. No offense to anyone that says they do 20-minute lifts in the college space. I don't know how you do it. What are you getting done? I would argue that you're not accomplishing much.
Yes. And do you have the whole squad in there at once?
Yes. Since I've been at Auburn, it's always the whole squad at once. In the spring, we're looking to have Monday and Friday the whole group. Wednesday, we'll do 2 groups of like 14 athletes. As of right now, again, we're adding 14 more kids to a roster that haven't scheduled classes yet. So we'll see. But another thing, kind of to backtrack a little, that I'm hoping to bring into the college space that I gained from my experience in Austin with Austin FC and the MLS. There's one of me, and I've touched on how I wear all these hats. And I had to sit back recently and be like, I need help. I cannot do all this alone. And so my job is we don't have the budget to go hire someone to sit in this strength coach role, sports science role, and let me just be the fitness coach. So how am I going to find interns to do these sports science things? Take some of the load off of me. Get one of our GAs who I want to help grow and invest in and give him some tasks and responsibilities and get some sports performance interns. So we have a whole team of people. When I have a weight room of 28 athletes, everyone's being taken care of. So that's a project of mine now is, all right, it's time for me to pour in and mentor people and have a whole system running.
Yeah, and also delegate some things so that you can
Yes.
not
I'm
be
not a
drawn
great
so thin.
delegator, Nicole.
I'm the same. I totally get it. And especially, I feel like when it's something that you're so invested in and passionate about, it can be hard to let some things go. It's like, wait, but this is so important. Like, there's a little bit of not like control freak style, just like you care so much about it that you want to make sure it's done well
Yes.
and you enjoy delivering it too. So I'm right
Right.
there with you. I get it.
Sometimes it's just easier for me to do it than explain
Yes.
to someone how to do it. But I recognize that I had really great mentors that just threw me in the fire and let me crash and burn a few times. But I right? Have to deliver these things to a coaching staff who doesn't have time for things to crash and burn very
Yes,
often.
exactly. So I also want to touch a little bit on your approach to fitness and trying to get as much of that done with the ball as possible. Occasionally, sometimes, you have to add to that or modify that in some ways. How are you mostly monitoring, tracking, assessing fitness levels in the athletes? And how do you go about making sure that they're getting the stimulus that they need to continue developing on the fitness side?
Yeah, I want to touch on my very general framework, and it continues to evolve. I was on a walk every morning, and I've listened to all your podcast episodes on my morning walks recently. But my morning walks, I have my greatest thoughts, and one of my thoughts, like 2 mornings ago, was, "Gosh, what I love so much about this career is the growth you get to experience every day, and being a lifelong learner." Because what I did a year ago, I look back and I'm like, oh, like, God, I'm not doing that anymore. So where I'm at right now with the running portion of fitness, right? I look at conditioning, three different aspects. There's fitness, the biomechanics and skill, and then the mental resilience piece. So the fitness, just running, we run a fitness test called the Bronco. Our coaching staff, that is what they prefer. We sat down. I'm like, okay, great. I can get information from this that I can make applicable to each individual's training. I just use that to calculate maximal aerobic speed. And from there, I tailor everyone's conditioning that way. Their conditioning they're doing off of campus, right? We're going into winter break for 7 weeks. They're going to be away from me. The reality is they're probably not going to touch a soccer ball as much as we wish, but these girls will go out and run. And I will program long intervals, short intervals, and some Tabata style conditioning. All of it is based off of their maximal aerobic speed, each individual athlete. So I have a template. I might go to the Google Sheet, figure out your distance. For your long intervals, we got 2 minutes of work at 85% of your maximal aerobic speed. You got 2 sets of 3 with X amount of rest in between sets. That's how we are tailoring their conditioning here off campus. We'll follow the same method during those 8-hour periods, right? And the intensity of those long intervals, short intervals, the Tabata style adjusts. Right now, we're in the off season. I'm not worried about them being game ready fit. We just need some aerobic work and then a little bit of anaerobic work over here. And then once they're on campus and we're out of that 8-hour period and we're not doing like team runs, we're monitoring the athletes who have been under our care. I know kind of like what is a hard training session for them based off of any all the GPS metrics. Also recognize they're coming off of a long break, but I kind of have a good gauge on, okay, what's a heavy session for this group? What's a more medium, lower session from a volume intensity standpoint and like work rate standpoint. And for those athletes, we'll try to fill buckets based on positions. Okay, if our central players in the field didn't get a ton of A cell, D cell efforts this week, okay, what do we need to do here? If individuals on the widths of the field who typically cover more high speed sprint distance didn't get a lot of that, you need to fill that bucket. That's how I tend to tailor their conditioning or filling buckets outside of those general fitness or conditioning sessions.
And I'm actually super curious now. This is something I hadn't actually thought about before, but in the pro space, there's the competitive season, there's preseason, and then there's the transition phase, which gets shorter and shorter each year, it seems like. A unique factor is that in the college space, you have that entire spring season. And so when you were mentioning just then, right, like in off season right now, they're off campus for 7 weeks. You don't need the intensity to be at a place where they're ready to perform in a full match. So how do you go about approaching the spring season? Do you have various mesocycles within the spring season of, okay, I know you have like that 8-hour rule and then it goes up to 20 in February. And so there's a little bit of like a ramp on period to that. And then are you consistently just building the engines during the spring season? Are you trying to maybe peak before, I don't know, spring break and then drop off a little bit and then peak again right before summer? How do you approach such a long period of time where performance isn't necessarily, like game performance on the field is not necessarily the main objective?
Yeah, so I would say the period of time we're in right now is we've been out of season. We're going into week 4 this week, so 3 weeks. We're kind of still in our transition period. We had a whole week off. I gave them 2 weeks where we had 0 running. Do not go outside and run. And that sounds crazy to tell these girls with, like, biting at their nails, wanting to go run. I gave them incline treadmill walks, bike workouts. We did a lot more cross training. We're still moving, we're still doing things. We did a lot of unilateral work in the gym, and now we're working more into, like, a capacity block. But I think most of our group will do the work, but when they get back on campus, I have to assume, worst case scenario, they didn't do it. And so when they get on campus, those 8 weeks were pretty much in a capacity block. We'll move more into like in the weight room, general strength. But then on the field, maybe it becomes a little bit more specific to their position and their demands and where they're falling. But I think the most important job I have in the spring and right now is to get our coaching staff to understand we don't need them game fit. On January 7th, when we start training, I don't expect our athletes to pass the fitness test. And college coaches across the country need to understand that. You don't want your athletes game fit on January 7th because then we probably have just overtrained. And it's next to impossible to probably maintain that all the way until we play a game in August. These athletes need time down because at the end of the day, they're not professionals. They're handling all these other these stressors. But college coaches look at the professional realm and try to. There's a great things we can pull from there, but these athletes are not that. They're handling being a adolescent and being under 20 years old. A lot of them, they're handling relationships and living in a dorm and eating dorm food and things going on back home, and their brains are still developing. Um, so I think that's the most important part of my job right now and going into the spring is getting our staff to understand and being the voice of reason for these kids of you don't have to be the most fit version of yourself. That's why I have a job.
Exactly. That's such a good point. You can't have them ready to play a game 8 months before they're actually going to play a game. They won't maintain that, number one. And number two, they have, like you're saying, they have so many other things going on. And for anyone who has not either been a college athlete yourself or has not worked with college athletes, the amount of life stressors and, like you said, they're still developing cognitively at that age. They're developing socially, figuring out who they are as human beings on top of trying to perform at optimal levels. And so keeping them at that high peak is really just going to do more harm than anything else. And so trying to balance that out and see them as a whole person, not just a soccer player.
Right. And I think when we look at, because I get to play a moderate to large role in like the planning of practice and ideology around that piece. Last spring and this spring will look completely different. Last spring, we did practice, right? We taught, okay, this is our style of play. Guess what we did in this fall? We didn't do any of that because a ton of kids left that, we nicely encouraged to step away because they're not this program, it's not the best fit for them. They can go shine elsewhere. And we brought in 14 new people and we had to completely change our tactics. So I just question if in college soccer, if you know you're going to have a ton of roster turnover or you don't have most of your group there in the spring, do you really need to spend that much time tactically on formation and ideas about tactics? And is it more technical work and general possession? Where this spring will be different. We will have everyone but one person. We have all of our freshmen coming in early but one. We'll probably get all of our people out of the transfer portal. we could probably focus a little bit more on the tactical side of things and what we're hoping to accomplish in the fall. And hopefully that sets us up for more success. But I think that's an important thing that if someone gets to sit in my role and educate their coaching staff on is a key piece that I learned from what we did last spring going into this past fall.
Mallory, it sounds so exciting to be in the role that you're in. I'm low-key a little jealous of the role that you have, just being so embedded in the team and being able to wear so many hats and yeah, just being able to really influence not only the athletic careers of these athletes, but also the lives and hopefully the health span of them as well. It's such an important role, and yeah, I think it's so exciting, and I love that there's somebody like you in this space because we had some good resources when I was in college, but just seeing how much it's grown is really nice to see. Well, I can't let you leave, though, without answering my two last rapid fire questions, which are more like fill in the blanks. So the first one is I wish everyone working with collegiate female soccer players knew this about their physical development.
Ooh. I think that the gym is going to make greater gains than anything you do on the field when it comes to like speed and jumping. I think, okay, let's get young athletes in the gym moving really well and strong, and then we'll see gains in those speed and acceleration spaces on the field.
Love it, especially since they have such young training ages or low training ages that they get those newbie gains too. So that's also nice. Okay, the second one is my favorite thing about working in women's soccer is
The relationships. I think I see, like, it's exciting because I get to be someone for my athletes that I didn't have coming up in the college soccer space. I didn't have a strength coach. I didn't have a female figure, right? Hopefully they look up to me and I didn't have someone like myself to look up to.
I love that. Mallory, thank you so much for being on. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I actually just glanced up at the time before and I was like, oh my gosh, I could talk for at least another hour with this stuff about you. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.